All right, everyone. I'd like to talk to you about an author, poet, filmmaker. His name is Sherman Alexie. Alexie is Native American from a tribe in Spokane. He grew up on the reservation, and he's an award-winning author. He's done movies. If you're a fan of Adam Beach made one of his books into a movie, or made a movie of his work called Smoke Signals. And the book that is being banned in the schools, he has a young adult book award, and the name of the book, and I'm going to look at my notes because it's a long title. It's called The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. And it's being read in schools, and there are a lot of schools in the Midwest that are trying to ban his books. And when I go online to research this, the reasons that they're stating that they want it banned is because it's the story of Sherman Alexie growing up and coming of age. And part of a young boy coming of age is masturbation. So there's a masturbation part in the book. And so they're naming that they don't want their children who are 15, 16, 17 years old reading about masturbation. Now, my argument about that is you have these little machines, and you can get free porn on these. And if you can't get it on your phone because your parents have it blocked, I'm sure you can have a friend access the free porn sites. So I'm not so much worried about a 17-year-old or a 15-year-old reading about masturbation in a book. And there's other criticisms that in the book he has a friend who has an eating disorder, and that though he doesn't go into much detail about it, it's sort of brushed, lightly talked about. And so they don't like that there's someone in the book that has an eating disorder. This man is writing a biography about his life, coming of age, problems that he had, problems that his friends had. And I've actually gone online looking this book up on YouTube, and I see high schoolers actually reviewing this book. And I have yet to see anyone from high school say anything negative about the book. I mean, I'm surprised, because I wanted to hear what the people who are actually reading the book, what they thought. And all of the reviews that I'm watching on YouTube and I'm reading, very positive reviews. There's high schoolers that are saying, yeah, I don't like reading books. I hate to read, but I loved this book, and it got me reading. And I read this book in 2 days. And everything I'm reading about this book from the targeted age group is nothing but positive. I mean, I can't think of any other literary book where I've gone online and researched it, and no one has anything bad to say except these parents who want to shield their children from the real world. And they don't like some of the racial terms that are used in the book. That's the other argument. One of the racial terms that Mr. Alexie talks about being called is an apple. And if you white people are confused, you're like, what's an apple? Why is that offensive? An apple is a racial slur used against other Native people. And I've certainly had it directed at me. Sherman Alexie's had it directed at him. It means red on the outside and white on the inside. So you're betraying your race. And Sherman Alexie in the book is betraying his race because he leaves the reservation to go to a private Catholic school off the reservation so that he can have better educational and economical opportunities, because the schools on the reservations are failing. He recognizes there's not that much opportunity for him, and so he leaves the reservation. And so he's constantly picked on when the team plays basketball. His high school plays basketball against the kids on the reservation, how they're knocking him around and being more violent with him because he has betrayed them. And he lives on the res. He just went to school off the res. And he talks about, the economic hardships that at one point On a Friday night, he packs up his things from his locker because he doesn't think he can afford the school. And a white family steps up and actually gives him a place to stay. And on Monday, he's back at school. And so this is a real life biography with real life experiences that people want to censor. They want to ban that book. They want to burn it. And, you know, Sherman Alexie talks about alcoholism on the reservation. Now, Sherman Alexie is very controversial, and even amongst Native people, because he says that alcoholism is a problem on the reservation and that it's not a stereotype. He says that it's not a stereotype, the drunken Indian. It killed his father, his mother's a recovering addict, his siblings, his aunts, his uncles. And I know for myself, I like a cocktail every now and then. But you're not going to see me drinking a lot because, again, it's a stereotype that you don't want to perpetuate. And he'd probably get on my case for calling it a stereotype. But it's not something that I want people to see that I'm doing because I don't. The problem is the addiction gene is real. And I don't want to have someone say, well, she says I shouldn't start drinking, but look, she's having a drink. For me, I've never had that problem. I've never had the problem of addiction. I think if I have an addiction problem for me, I'm a food addict. I love food. And when I'm sad, when I'm upset, I will eat cakes and cookies and pies. And I go for the most unhealthiest things you can think of because that makes me feel better. So if I have an addiction for me, it's food and not drugs or alcohol. But that addiction gene is there. The same thing, he talks about being bipolar. And he says that's a condition of colonialism, that you live in two worlds, and you know that you've been living in two worlds, you can't help but be bipolar. And even I admit that I have some issues in my mental health that I am addressing. I've been addressing my entire life. I have a problem with depression. There's some days where I can't even get out of bed. I can't face the world. I will lay in bed for 48 hours and not get out of bed except to go to the bathroom. I will not bathe. You know, so I understand those issues as well. So when I hear Sherman Alexie talk, I feel like I'm listening to the male version of myself talking. Like I totally get what he's saying. And, you know, he does talk about tribalism in interviews. I love watching interviews with Mr. Alexie. I am a fan of his. And, you know, he talks about tribalism and that tribalism is not about individualism. And, you know, you have to think the same way. You have to worship the same way. You have to vote the same way. There's no individualism in it. But if you look at the way Native people live and Hispanic people, we vote or we live very Republican lives. You know, we're very religious people. We go to church, believe in God. We're pro-life. We're pro-family. We're pro-gun. There's guns everywhere on the reservation. Oh my God, everyone's got a gun. You know. And that's not just me talking. That's also Mr. Alexie talking. So I'm not just saying this without, you know, the thing about being, you know, racially ambiguous is what he calls it. You know, I can blend with a group of white people and they'll accept me as white. I can go and blend in with Native people and they accept me as Native. I can go and hang out with Mexican people and habla español and be accepted as a Mexican person. And I hear how the groups talk. So he talks about also being a fly on the wall of certain, you know, different ethnic groups, which, you know, was kind of neat to hear someone else reflecting that experience. And Anyway, I just wanted to come on and talk about the banning of his books and talking about how, people need to get over themselves, stop censoring things, stop taking things so personally. This is an autobiography of a great Native American author, poet, filmmaker. He's a realist in how he looks at Native people. He does not want to romanticize us. And there's an interview where I hear him talking, where he talks about having to put his mother in a nursing home. And he says, wait a minute, Native people don't do that. And then he says, well, wait a minute, now I'm romanticizing my people. So he's very realist in how he looks at Native people versus the very romantic view that we've had, the noble savage that if you're not living on a reservation, that you're exposed to all of the time. And a lot of people think he's down on Native people. I think he's more of a realist about how we look, about looking at ourselves and reflecting upon ourselves. And personally, I think we will not improve upon ourselves until we take a realistic inventory of who we are as a people and where we would like to be. And I know my conservative friends are going to give me shit for this, excuse my language, but I do believe that Sherman Alexie is correct in that it really starts with an apology to the Native people for what happened. Yeah, okay, give me shit. Go ahead. Go on, give me shit. I said it. We deserve an apology. And I'll tell you why. We deserve an apology, not so much to hear you say, I'm sorry, but to acknowledge what happened. We're not so great about acknowledging what happened with Native people. I mean, how many people know that Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator, a year before he wrote the Emancipation Proclamation, killed 38 Indians in Minnesota for being terrorists, for going out and trying to feed their families? The largest mass hanging of any Indian tribe or any group of Indians happened under the command of President Lincoln. Everyone talks of Native people as if they're in the past. We're still alive and kicking. And so that apology, in my view, is to acknowledge that we are still here, to acknowledge the things that happened. And white liberals are good at giving apologies and humoring Native people, which is another reason why I think they vote Democrat. And I think Sherman Alexie would agree with me on that. Sherman Alexie is also, just to throw it out there, I think he's an atheist. So he's not that spiritual. He believes in visions and things like that, but I don't think he specifically is religious. I think he's an atheist. And so I'm a fan of his, even though he is also a Democrat. But when I hear his interviews, he talks about liberals and Democrats and conservatives and Republicans, but I don't hear any animosity towards any group. And for a while, I was kind of listening to hear what his political views are, and they're kind of ambiguous. But he does, at one point in one of the interviews, admit, or says, I am a Democrat and I am an atheist. So, again, you have to read his works, see his movies. One of his other books is called Indian Killer. Another one, Reservation Blues, Lone Ranger and Tonto Fist Fight in Heaven, a book of poetry called Blasphemy. So check him out. He's a very talented author. He's very good at what he does. Great filmmaker. And I'm glad to call him a part of our Native community and see him as a role model and a positive influence on Native people. So just a literary review of Sherman Alexie, who he is, the controversy with his part-time Indian book being banned in the Midwest, and have you all go out and look at his work and judge it for yourself. And anyway, I'm going to be out. So hoka ara, out in 3, 2, 1.